morning, everyone. My name is Carol Charno. I'm the president and CEO of Boston Children's Museum, and I couldn't be more thrilled to invite you to our Lunch and Learn series. Today's presentation is so exciting. I'm the oldest of 4 siblings, and I have 2 sons who are now in their 20s, so I'm really looking forward to this talk. Jennifer is, as many of you know, the founder and co-owner of The Loved Child, which is also known as the TLC Family Center in Belmont. And it has over 25 years' experience in supporting the development of parents and their young children. They are experts in support and education for expecting families and those with babies and young children. They also offer professional parenting workshops and consultation services for preschool and childcare organizations, community groups, pediatric practices, etc. And I'm sure Jennifer would be happy to tell you more about TLC after the session. She obtained her master's degree in child development clinical psychology from Tufts, and she has a bachelor's in psychology and Spanish from the College of Worcester. She spent almost 10 years at ISIS Parenting. I'm sure many of you remember ISIS Parenting, which was a really terrific organization. We were very sorry to see it go. And she's been facilitating developmental play and parenting groups, providing private parenting consulting, and creating curricula for the Child Development Program. Her clinical background work includes work at Boston Medical Center, Mass General, Brigham and Women's, and Boston Children's Hospital, and she's been associated with so many distinguished organizations, even the Walt Disney Company and Henson Pictures, which I think that's interesting. You can let us know how that all figures into it. This will be a wonderful opportunity for us to hear from Jennifer and her thoughts about supporting sibling relationships, and you will have plenty of time to answer questions at the end of the session, and I know you'll have many. So let's welcome Jennifer Gillette.
Okay, well, I certainly do feel quite honored to be here today. I hope everybody realizes that we are in the 2nd oldest children's museum in the world. This certainly makes me very proud to be a Bostonian. My hunch is that I'm certainly preaching to the choir today. I'm speaking to a room filled with loving folks that are dedicated to the development of children. I feel at home. I too am fascinated how children learn best. I too believe strongly in the importance of play. In fact, I have spent the last 26 years now committed to supporting the healthy development of children and their families. And personally, I also walk the talk. I am a big-time, imperfect mother of 2 boys, 15 and 13. And then about 4 years ago, I began parenting a 3rd baby, not the kind that you're perhaps thinking of, but rather I founded and began The Loved Child, also known as the TLC Family Center, also known as just TLC. And we're located in Belmont and support and educate expecting families and those with babies and young children in the Boston area. My dream, just like communities have senior centers, why not have family centers in every community? So that's hopefully what is ahead. So before I briefly describe TLC and then jump right into how best we can support sibling relationships, I'd like to take a moment and thank Debbie Amato. She has just been so lovely to work with, the Development Manager of Operations and Research and Programs at the Boston Children's Museum. Sue Kim, the Vice President of Development, and also, unfortunately, Sarah Magazine couldn't be here. She's the Vice President of External Affairs at the Mentor Network and the co-chair of the Boston Children's Museum Board of Directors and of a Board of Overseers. So let's begin very briefly. TLC is comprised of these 5 components. classes, workshops, parenting consultations, special family events, and on-site education, such as today. Here are some pictures from our developmental play and parenting classes. So we focus equally on the development of both children and their loving parents and or caregivers. And the majority of our classes involve the parents too. We do have a couple drop-off classes, but again, we love to have the parents present. And as some of you know, those days go by so quickly when you start dropping off your children and can't stay. So we have parenting in infancy classes, parenting in play, parenting and sibling play, music and movement, art and sensory, parent and child yoga. We also have parent workshops for families from expectancy all the way through the school age years, through teenage years. As you can see from just a sample of some of the topics, we have a variety of parent workshops. We host these in the evening hours, also on the weekends. I think probably some of you would enjoy. We've got Toddlers 101, Tantrums, Hurting Behaviors, It's Mine, Preventing Picky Eating. Why do we keep yelling? Anger management for caregivers. How do we talk with our children about their bodies and sexuality? And most recently, I wrote and presented Peaceful Parenting for Busy Parents and at Bright Horizons. Then we do one-on-one support around the topics that are listed there. I would say sleep support is probably our hottest topic, especially from the, in that newborn period in the first year. Sibling rivalry, challenging behaviors, toilet training. We have lots and lots of special family events, sing-alongs and birthday parties, baby showers. We have a monthly book group for parents. And then the component of on-site education where we go out, the experts at TLC go out and present at lunch and learns like today, pediatric practices, preschools, community groups. So if you're interested in any of that at the end, please don't hesitate to be in touch. So let's get going here. I love this picture, especially the dog in the mix there. Just a show of hands, I'm so curious. Raise your hand if you have children 0 to 3. Okay. How about 3 to 6? Okay. How about 6 to 8? Whoa, what a great mix. 8 to 12. Okay. 12 or older. And I heard there's a couple grandmas here, so there might even be some kids that are in their 20s. This work never ends, right? So the agenda for today is a lot. As I was sharing earlier to someone, this is typically a 2-hour workshop. So I'm going to be speeding along here, and if it's okay with you guys, it's not normally my style. I like to be more interactive, but let's save our questions until the Q&A time. But what we're going to be talking about today initially is temperament, spacing, and birth order, and how that affects sibling relationships. I'm going to suggest some preventive work we can do to strengthen sibling and family relationships. Then I'll get to what you guys are all here for, how best we can handle sibling fighting. And I've prepared a resource list that you're welcome to take out your smartphone and snap a picture. And then, yes, we will make sure that there's time at the end for questions. I'd like to start. Everyone loves to be read to, right? Starting in utero. I'd like to read a little story out of this very well-known book, Siblings Without Rivalry. I think this might help us put ourselves in our children's shoes. Imagine that your spouse puts an arm around you and says, "Honey, I love you so much. You are so wonderful that I've decided to have another wife, just like you. When the new wife finally arrives, you see that she's very young and kind of cute. When the three of you are out together, people say hello to you politely, but exclaim ecstatically over the newcomer. Isn't she adorable? Hello, sweetheart. You're so precious. Then they turn to you and ask, how do you like your new wife? The new wife needs clothing. Your husband goes into your closet, takes some of your sweaters and pants, and gives them to her. When you protest, he points out that since you've put on a little weight, your clothes are too tight on you and they'll fit her perfectly. The new wife is maturing rapidly. Every day she seems smarter and more competent. One afternoon, as you're struggling to figure out the directions on the new computer your husband bought you, she bursts in the room and says, "Ooh, can I use it? I know how." When you tell her she can't use it, she runs crying to your husband. Moments later, she returns with him. Her face is tear-stained and he has an arm around her. He says to you, "What would be the harm in letting her have a turn? Why can't you share?" One day you find your husband and the new wife lying on the bed together. He's tickling her, and she's giggling. Suddenly the phone rings and he answers it. Afterwards, he tells you that something important has come up and he must leave immediately. He asks you to stay home with the new wife and make sure she's all right. So I also love this comic. As you look through, all is going quite well with the older sibling. Even some adults are commenting what a great big brother he is. But then we see in the last two squares, today's smiling big brother is interested in returning his baby sister to the stork. I have no doubt that there are numerous parents here today with children wishing to do just the same. So I've come here today to share both good and bad news about siblings. Let's get the bad news over with first. The bad news is sibling rivalry is unavoidable and inevitable. The truth is it's really hard for children to share their parents. Why? The older sibling has to share resources with the younger sibling. Now the chance of survival dramatically decreases. Perhaps even unconsciously, they wonder, if there is a tiger and it jumps out of the bushes, who are you going to save first? Maybe the children are even onto something here. As scientist, journalist, and author on sibling research, Jeffrey Kluger shares, 70% of fathers and 65% of mothers exhibit a preference for at least one child. And keep in mind here, the key word is exhibit. The remaining parents may simply be doing a better job concealing their preference. What's the take-home message then? We as parents must convince our children there is enough love and attention for everyone. The good news is sibling love is just as natural as sibling rivalry. So I suggest today then that we focus today on what we do have control of. To ease our daily disappointment, let's all agree to let go of that very unrealistic image of a totally harmonious sibling relationship. As you will hear repeatedly today, and proven in research, we can, as parents, greatly improve the relationship between our siblings by nurturing our individual relationships with each child. We can also look through another lens. We can focus and celebrate the many benefits of sibling rivalry. We know that through sibling fighting and arguing, our children are learning how to deal with power struggles, be assertive and stand up for their position, negotiate, compromise, manage conflict, resolve differences. We know as adults these skills will be extremely helpful in the years ahead. So what are the factors that influence sibling rivalry? And just to note, these are factors that we have little control over. Temperament, spacing between siblings, characteristics of birth order. Let's begin with temperament. This is near and dear to my heart. Some of you know my research before I went into clinical work with, when I worked with Barry Brazelton and Jerome Kagan. We assessed newborn babies at the Brigham and then followed up at Harvard University in the psychology department. So before I can attempt to support a family around any parenting challenge, such as temper tantrums, aggression, appropriate limit setting, toilet training, or sibling rivalry, I ask the parents to familiarize themselves with the concept of temperament. What is temperament? Temperament refers to a person's behavioral style, how he or she reacts to and approaches the world. And why is it necessary then to be familiar with temperament theory when supporting siblings? Recognizing each child's style of temperament and our own temperament style helps us recognize the mismatches or the matches between siblings. We call this goodness of fit. Or how best to anticipate, prepare, support our children in challenging situations. And also, it decreases parental blame. Every child comes into this world with his or her own unique style. I typically ask the parents to examine the classic 9 temperament traits discovered by Thomas and Chess back in the early 1970s. Sensitivity, regularity, activity, intensity, approach withdrawal, adaptability, persistence, distractibility, mood. From the parents' ratings, we can then create 3 constellations, and about 65% of children fit into the following groups. One group being easy, flexible, that's about 40% of children. Active, feisty, about 10% of children, and the third group, slow to warm up, or cautious, about 15%. So due to the time constraints today, I'm not going to go into more detail about temperament, but if you're interested in this, there's a fantastic book, Understanding Your Child's Temperament, by Dr. William Carey. I also noticed that in my bag, I do have one of my temperament surveys up here, and I'll leave it out afterwards if you want to come up and look through each area of temperament and how that relates, again, to your style and also the styles of your children. So, parents love this. Many of us don't have the luxury to make a decision around spacing, but if you do, for health reasons, the medical community recommends to wait at least 18 months between having a baby and conceiving again. Research demonstrates that children that are closer in age exhibit more sibling rivalry, especially in the form of aggressiveness and competitiveness. But when they're not fighting, these siblings that are less than 2 years apart tend to enjoy their company more than siblings spaced more than 2 years apart. Based on birth order theory, I'm going to just quickly go through characteristics of firstborns, middle, and lastborn children. So firstborns tend to be more conservative, keen to please parents, often the boss of the other kids. They're natural leaders, US presidents, astronauts, achievement-oriented, assertive, extroverted, organized, responsible, jealous, stressed. And what we can do, parenting tips to support these firstborn children, is relax. Try not to put too much pressure on firstborns to perform. They're already putting so much pressure on themselves. Help them develop high standards and expectations without being perfectionists. Encourage them to play and enjoy life and not to worry constantly about academics or other responsibilities. Develop a family culture of mistakes are okay. And fill your home with humor and let them learn to laugh at themselves. Characteristics of secondborn or middle children. These children can feel overlooked, tend to be more easygoing, good negotiators, make friends easily, assertive, flexible, empathetic, can handle disappointment. And we find that the relationship between the firstborn child determines whether the secondborn or middle child imitates or rebels against the older sibling. So parenting tips for these secondborn or middle children: never, and we're going to be talking about this in greater length, compare the second or the middle child to another sibling. Help them find their own strengths. This is a good one, an important one. Take and share photos of your middle child by themselves, not always in pictures with their siblings. Find opportunities for one-on-one time. Make sure they get a new outfit once in a while, a new toy that's not always a hand-me-down. And encourage a special interest in that middle child that the other siblings don't already participate in. And characteristics of the youngest child: they're often the rebel of the family. They want to change the world. Sometimes they settle down a little later in life. I'm smiling, I'm the third. Persistent and an outgoing charmer, the family clown, at times overindulged by the rest of the family, experiences far fewer rules, the attention seeker, has a rebellious streak, and avoids making decisions. So parenting tips for these youngest: teach them to stand up for themselves when the older siblings boss them around. Encourage them to speak for themselves instead of letting older siblings tell stories for them or introduce them to strangers. Put some pressure on them and give them some responsibility. Make sure you raise your expectations. Resist the temptation to keep them as the baby. Let them grow up. Maintain your parenting energy for the youngest. Make sure you still go to their school events, even though you've seen it all before. Keep questioning them about school and activities. Don't let them slide under the radar. So the focus in this next section is about preventive maintenance. What we can do to nurture sibling relationships, how we can fill up these children's love tanks, as I call them, and provide an emotional tune-up on a daily basis. Now, this is very different than just intervening when things are not going well. The advantages of focusing on preventive maintenance: that your children are going to feel more connected with you, and they're going to want to behave. They're going to be able to self-regulate and get help with those emotions before falling apart and fighting with their siblings. So the best way to support sibling relationships, as I keep mentioning, is to spend individual time with each child. Special time, let's call it. Now, depending on the ages and the interests of your children, this special time will be quite unique. The key is this special time is unstructured, and I recommend at least 10 minutes a day. And I understand folks that are working in the home or out of the home, 10 minutes might sound like a long time, but it is a world to the child. To have the child be in control of what that special time is going to look like. Now, this does not mean going out to the local ice cream store or going and purchasing a special toy at Target. I mean literally providing undivided time. Yes, putting away our smartphones and focusing on that child and his or her interests. The second preventive maintenance idea I suggest is creating family rules. And just like you might see in a preschool classroom or in a second grade classroom, I recommend posting these family rules. And you can start posting these family rules even before children can read. So, best case scenario is you sit down as a family and you create this list together and have this list posted, as I said, perhaps in the kitchen or in the space that the children play in. And again, this list will be very unique for each family depending on the ages and the family culture. For example, for a family with very young children, perhaps one of the rules would be listen when other people are talking. Number 2, keep hands, feet to ourselves. Number 3, we don't hurt people. Number 4, this is an important one all the way through. We ask before touching somebody's body and stop when someone says stop. And by the way, I want to give credit to Dr. Laura Markham for these ideas. Another thing we can do is schedule, sort of like the Brady Bunch, family meetings. What we do in my family is before any meal, well, before we have dinner, we share a rose, a thorn, and a bud. Is anybody familiar with that concept? It's lovely. So the thorn would be something that happened in the day that you didn't enjoy, that made you sad or hurt. The rose would be something that you really enjoyed about the day. And a bud would be something that you're really looking forward to. Friday pizza night. I love the concept of morning snuggles. Now, we often think about connecting with our children before we put them to bed, but I don't know about you guys. After a long day, you just want those kids to go to sleep. And trust me, they can read your body language. But in the morning, hopefully after a good night's sleep, it can be a wonderful time to institute a snuggle time. And no, someone asked me, does that count as special time? No, that's separate. How about a family secret sign that you do right before a transition that comes up? So before my 13-year-old to this day gets on the bus, we go like this to each other. Which is a heart to let them each other know that we love each other. The other idea that I love is a family kindness journal. So this is a journal that's kept on the kitchen counter where initially will probably be the grown-ups can take notes and write down acts of kindness that they see. And as the children get older, obviously the children can write down acts of kindness. So for example, I have a Zachary and a Nathaniel. Zachary helped Nathaniel build a fort today. Nathaniel shared his cookie with Zachary today. Both Zachary and Nathaniel took out the recycling without my asking. That was last night. Chores are done in teams rather than individually. So instead of it's not fair, I always have to I recommend that we ask our kids to do the chores together and hopefully decrease the bickering that can also occur. And then the last one I'm going to recommend today is we know that children often fight around property. So years ago, a family recommended this to me, that toys that are downstairs in the play space don't belong to anybody in particular. They are community property. So that this can be helpful for play dates, when people come over, when the siblings are together, these are shared toys. But we need to be respectful. I don't want my kids digging through my jewelry box, for example. So everybody needs to have a space where they get to put away things that they don't want to share. And this can cut down on bickering tremendously. So I'm going to give you a couple more preventive maintenance ideas. I'm going to read this great comic right out of Siblings Without Rivalry. Instead of worrying about giving equal amounts, you gave him more than me. I did not. I gave you each 4 pancakes. But his are bigger. No, they're not. I made them exactly the same size, says the parent. Focus on each child's individual needs. You gave him more than me, says the sibling. Oh, are you still hungry? Very different. Yeah, a little. Would you like half a pancake, or are you hungry enough for a whole one? And I don't know about the other parents in the room, but this is a question I often hear parents tell me that their children ask. Instead of claiming equal love, who do you love best? I love you all the same. I've told you 100 times that I love you all equally. No, she doesn't. She's just saying that. Show children how they're loved uniquely. Who do you love best? Each of you is special to me. You are my only Robin. In the whole wide world, there isn't another like you. No one has your thoughts, your feelings, your smile. I'm so glad you're my daughter. She really loves me. So there's a big difference there. Avoid all comparisons. Never, not even if you're attempting to be positive, make comparisons between siblings. So, for example, why do you give me such a hard time about brushing your teeth? See how your sister just opens her mouth? You may think you're motivating your child, but what he hears is that his sister is better and that you love her more. Just set the limit that you need to set without reference to the other sibling. So even positive comparisons backfire. When you say, gosh, I wish your brother would just sit down and do his homework with no fuss, just like you do. Your daughter thinks, I'm the good kid, so mom loves me, and I always need to be the good girl to be loved. She's also now invested in continuing to see your other child as the bad kid. So we're going to really try hard not to make comparisons between our children. As a mom, I sometimes wonder if my boys have this identical conversation before I walk in the room. So let's get to the fighting, guys. Let's start with some evidence-based facts about siblings fighting. Young siblings fight about 7 times in 1 hour. And about 10% of those conflicts end happily, or I should say only 10% of those conflicts end happily. 90% of the time, the sibling with more power gets his or her way. And although this is discouraging and difficult for parents to observe their children in conflict, it's part of every human relationship. These moments of conflict are teachable moments. As we discussed earlier, the conflict resolution skills that will come to good use in the future years. So research in the world of child development and family psychology has found that strict and permissive parents raise kids who fight more. Controlling parents who punish raise children who are more negative with each other. And this makes complete sense to me. If an adult punishes an attempt to resolve conflict between siblings, the children learn to resolve conflict in a similar fashion. So why do children fight? And these are not in any particular order, by the way. Some children fight due to jealousy. They feel that one sibling is liked or loved more. There's just too much togetherness. Some children have a lower tolerance for spending lots of time with a sibling. Independence. Some younger children argue to prove their independence from older siblings. Possessiveness of things. Children want control over their own things and argue or fight when that control is threatened. And temperament, as we talked about, the mismatches. Children with differing temperaments may have more trouble getting along together. And last, they might just lack the skills needed to share and to compromise and to control impulses and negotiate. So let's talk about how punishment affects sibling relationships. Punishment focuses siblings on avoiding more punishment and not on improving their relationship. So when we set these limits without empathy, children then see it's our job, the adult's job, to control their behavior. And then unfortunately, it deprives the children the opportunity to learn self-control, how to regulate their own behaviors. Children raised with punishment learn to use it against their siblings to increase their standing as the good versus the bad child. We can then see an increase in child tattling in households where children are punished frequently. Children raised with punishment tend to be more resentful of each other. We even see higher rates of depression in children who have been punished, perhaps due to not having the experience of managing complex feelings. And punishment teaches fear. If you yell, they'll yell. If you use force, they're going to use force. So then, what is different between punishment and discipline? To punish, by definition, is to make someone suffer. Our hope when we impose a punishment is that the child will remember that punishment and not repeat that negative behavior. And maybe some of us know in the room that sometimes punishment will work, but unfortunately it will work for a short period of time and unfortunately compromise the relationship between the parent and the child. Today, I'm going to suggest a different method when handling and supporting siblings' negative behaviors. So I think it might be a little bit obvious that I'm not a big fan of punishment, especially when we're talking about supporting siblings. Rather, I am a big fan of a more peaceful and positive discipline method with children. So the first place that we begin is we, the adult, need to regulate our own emotions first. I have a workshop that I put on that's based completely on peaceful and positive parenting. But just that piece of the pie right there is a lot of work. And all of us, it's a process. It takes a lot of practice to learn how to control ourselves, especially when we love those little ones, or maybe in my case, 6'3", big ones in front of us. The next thing we need to do is prioritize to stay connected with the children in the belief that children want to do the right thing. And then third, we want to coach instead of control behavior. So, steps for handling conflict. When there is a moment of conflict, as we just discussed, we need to stay calm. We need to, again, depending on the age of the children, position ourselves at eye level with the children. And if this is a good fit for your child or children, place our hands on their bodies. We want to stay connected to both children by listening, empathizing, and describing the conflict without judgment. Again, a lot of work. And then the third thing is we want to restate those family rules that you came up with together and or let them know what they can do. So there are many ways to set limits or coach after you observe fighting between your children. And I just today, I'm going to share my top 4 that parents have shared with me as being very helpful. So a sibling has just hit another sibling. Instead of, don't hit your baby brother, you should be ashamed of yourself. How about trying, wow, that must be really frustrating for you to hear your brother cry. His crying really hurts our ears and makes us mad. It's not okay to hurt his body. You can say, quiet, please. Now, some of you, especially with the 0 to 3, might think, whoa, Jennifer, that's a lot of language. So you might need to tailor these words. But the pattern here is to say what isn't okay and pair it with what is okay. And you're also making sure that you are labeling that emotion. By the way, don't worry if you don't get the emotion right. The idea is you do that 263 times. Hopefully you're going to see this same pattern with the children themselves. Set the limit with empathy and use fantasy thoughts. So instead of, don't be such a mean big sister, try, you so wish he would stop crying. I bet sometimes you wish it were just the 2 of us again. And just the 2 of us could read books together forever and ever and ever. So the use of fantasy can be so strong, it can be used in numerous moments, not just in limit setting, to invite the older child to be, for example, a baby again, to make believe that he or she is just with you, those good old days. How about setting a limit with empathy and then giving two choices? Instead of, whoa, you should be ashamed of yourself. Try. It is hurting your ears to listen to him cry. You have a choice. You can either cover your ears or you can leave the room and play in the kitchen. How about setting a limit with empathy and finding a win-win situation? And this is great for the older children. Instead of, that's it, I am tired of you guys fighting constantly. That came very naturally, didn't it? Try. Let's see if we can come up with a plan together. What do you think would work? How about we put on some music that you both can listen to? Or I love and use often in my own parenting, a do-over. Let's just do a do-over. Another great trick, especially for these older kids, is get a notepad and stand there and literally take notes. Again, if this is something that irks your children, then it's not going to be a good suggestion. But sometimes it can be very helpful for the children to see, hey, Dad's really listening to me. He's writing down both of the sides of the story. Helpful tips for parenting siblings. So the million-dollar question, do we ignore or do we intervene when we see our children fighting? I do strongly respect that every single family is unique and different, but my simple answer to this is yes, we intervene, especially for young children. And why? Well, the presence of an adult within earshot who doesn't intervene is associated with increased rates of aggression between children. Children understand that non-intervention is an endorsement of their behavior. And I do realize this may be a little bit confusing to us because we have probably heard from friends and perhaps on parenting websites that parent intervention increases sibling fighting. But we need to be careful here. What the research suggests is that parents, unfortunately, when they do intervene, they're taking sides. They're not being neutral. They're not being non-judgmental. And yes, those parenting behaviors will increase sibling rivalry. So I also mentioned a couple minutes ago that remember 90% of the time, the sibling with more power and dominance gets her way. So I really worry about those younger children. So again, I am a believer in intervening. Now, think about it this way. When you were perhaps, if anyone's already, well, I hope many of you are through this. If not, this is another area I can help you with, toilet training. Initially, you were really involved with your little ones with toilet training. But then over time, as you coached them and you taught them, you became less involved and they became more independent in using the toilet independently. And that's my suggestion is, yes, initially, especially if you're seeing a lot of bickering and fighting in your home, you may need to be intervening quite frequently. And that hard work is going to pay off down the road. My other suggestion is think about Switzerland. No taking sides. When you have that urge, describe what you see instead of taking a side. During all of this, the adults can provide that loving guidance or coaching so that the siblings down the road learn how to resolve the conflict on their own. Dr. Laura Markham equates, as I was sharing, she equates this all to toilet training. Now, if you're parenting school-age children, you might find this green light to red light guideline helpful. So again, every family culture is different, but perhaps you could think of a green light as the siblings in the adjacent room bickering. And perhaps the green light in your household will be the parents are not going to get involved. But then the orange light, those children in the adjacent room are play fighting. The volume is rising. There's some name calling. And then maybe a parent could just step in around the corner and say, hey guys, I hear some crying. You guys need help? I'm here. And then the red light, it's a little bit more clear. There's aggressive or there's hurting behaviors. There's emotional harm going on. An adult is needed. An adult is needed to coach, to empathize, to listen, describe, and maybe even to gently separate the children. And perhaps you'd say something like, safety comes first in this family. I see and I hear folks are angry. Just like we have on our family rule chart, it's not okay for us to hurt each other's bodies. So this is extremely obvious, but I do want to remind everybody that a very powerful thing we can do as loving parents and caregivers is describe the positive moments. You can describe them when they're happening, or as powerful, you can describe them during those intimate moments when it's just the two of you together. Bring up concrete examples from the day, or yesterday, or last week. Wow. This is in the moment. Look how high the tower you built together. Isabel is sure lucky to have you as a big brother. She loves it when you blow bubbles for her to pop, make towers for her to crash down, help her get her socks on. What we're trying to do is we're trying to describe your children's behaviors in such a way that they believe that they are helpers rather than rivals. So my take-home ideas for today, there are many, many variables outside of our control that can influence the relationship between siblings. Temperament, birth order, characteristics, perhaps spacing. So what we can do and what I recommend is that we focus on and we nurture individual relationships with our children. The research clearly demonstrates that if our individual bonds are strong with each child, the sibling relationships are more likely to be healthier. I suggest perhaps that we go home today and try out 2 of the preventive maintenance ideas that I shared. Probably if I had to pick one, I would recommend, again, any age of child, non-readers all the way going off to college, to have family rules posted. And those family rules can change. I love the idea of sharing at mealtime, a thorn, a rose, a bud. Friday night, always getting pizza, for example. In the fall, always going apple picking, whatever it may be, those rituals. And then the 4th thing is when we see sibling conflict, because we're going to see sibling conflict, We're going to first calm ourselves. We're going to focus on connecting. And we're going to coach instead of control. Here is a list of my favorite books that I recommend to the families that we work with at TLC, and also some websites. And I think till 1:15.